In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. In the bustling city of Mecca, long before it became the center of Islam, power was firmly held by the tribe of the Quraysh. They controlled trade, wealth, and the Kaaba, the most sacred site of Arabia, visited by tribes from every corner of the peninsula. The Quraysh lived in honor, but also in arrogance, bound by traditions of idol worship and tribal pride. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, began to speak openly about the worship of one God, Allah, it shook the very foundations of Meccan society. For the powerful chiefs, this was not just a matter of belief, but a direct threat to their authority, their economy, and their control over the religious life of Arabia. How could they allow one man, supported by a handful of followers, to challenge centuries of tradition? At first, the Quraysh dismissed Muhammad's message as foolishness. They mocked him, calling him a poet, a sorcerer, or a madman. But as more people began to embrace Islam, both the weak and some from noble families, the Quraysh grew restless and fearful. The early Muslims were few, but their courage was unmatched. They came from all walks of life: merchants, shepherds, slaves, and women. They stood side by side, united by faith, ready to endure hardship for the truth. Among the most persecuted was Bilal ibn Rabah, an Abyssinian slave owned by a cruel master named Sumayyah ibn Khalaf. When Bilal embraced Islam, Sumayyah unleashed torture upon him with unimaginable cruelty. He dragged Bilal through the scorching sand, whipped him, and laid him on his back under the burning sun. A massive stone was pressed upon his chest, crushing him. But even in such agony, Bilal's voice echoed with unshakable conviction. Ahad. Ahad. One. One. This cry became a symbol of resistance, a declaration that no force on earth could silence faith in the one God. When Abu Bakr, the close companion of the Prophet, saw Bilal's suffering, he purchased his freedom, rescuing him from the cruelty of his oppressors. Bilal would later become the first muezzin, calling believers to prayer with the most beautiful voice in Islam. Another family that endured unbearable pain was that of Yasir ibn Amir, his wife Sumayyah bint Khayyat, and their son Ammar. They were among the earliest to accept Islam, and the Quraysh saw their weakness as an opportunity for savage torment. Day after day, they were beaten, insulted, and stretched on the hot desert ground. Sumayyah, though frail in body, showed iron strength of spirit. When ordered to abandon her faith, she refused. Abu Jahl, one of the fiercest enemies of Islam, struck her down with a spear, making her the first martyr of Islam. Her blood sealed her place in history as a woman of unshakable courage and faith. Even those of noble lineage were not spared humiliation. Uthman ibn Affan, a man of wealth and honor, was mocked and pressured by his own family for accepting Islam. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, one of the Prophet's earliest companions, was beaten and threatened by his relatives, who tried to force him back into idol worship. The Quraysh chiefs sought to stop the Prophet himself. They came to Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle and protector, offering him riches, power, and leadership if only Muhammad would abandon his call. But Muhammad, peace be upon him, responded with words that still echo with power. Even if they placed the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I would not abandon this mission. When persuasion failed, the Quraysh turned to boycott and collective punishment. For 3 long years, Muslims were forced into a valley, cut off from food, trade, and protection. Children cried from hunger, and even leaves and dry leather were eaten to survive. Yet their faith only grew stronger. This period, known as the boycott of Shaib Abi Talib, tested the believers beyond measure. Still, they endured with patience, holding firmly to their trust in Allah. What frightened the Quraysh most was not the number of Muslims, but the strength of their conviction. They saw slaves standing equal to nobles, women raising their voices alongside men, and the poor finding dignity through Islam. This new faith threatened to erase the hierarchies that had long kept the Quraysh in power. Stories of resilience spread beyond Mecca. Some Muslims, unable to bear the torment, sought refuge in Abyssinia, where a just Christian king, the Negus, gave them protection. The Quraysh sent envoys to persuade the king to expel them, but when the Muslims recited verses of the Quran about Jesus and Mary, the Negus was moved to tears and refused to betray them. The persecution in Mecca continued, but with every act of cruelty, the flame of Islam burned brighter. Even some Quraysh leaders, once fierce enemies, eventually embraced the truth. Among them was Umar ibn al-Khattab, who had once set out to kill Muhammad, but after hearing the Quran, his heart softened, and he became one of the strongest supporters of Islam. The struggle between the Quraysh and the Muslims was more than a conflict of tribes. It was the confrontation between falsehood and truth, oppression and justice, arrogance and humility. Through these years of trial, the believers learned patience, courage, and unity. They discovered that faith is not merely words on the tongue, but endurance in the face of suffering. Their sacrifices prepared them for greater challenges yet to come: the migration to Medina, the battles of Badr and Uhud, and the eventual triumph of Islam in Mecca itself. But none of these victories would have been possible without the foundation laid in those dark years of persecution. The tears, the blood, the hunger, and the pain of the first Muslims became the bedrock of the Islamic faith. Today, when we look back at their endurance, we see not just stories of the past, but living lessons. The courage of Bilal, the sacrifice of Sumayyah, the patience of Ammar, and the unyielding determination of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, remind us that truth demands sacrifice, but its reward is eternal. This was the Meccan period, a time of suffering and resilience, of oppression and hope, of pain and unshakable faith. From it emerged a community that changed the course of history forever. Brothers and sisters, if we have made mistakes, we ask Allah for forgiveness. May He grant us knowledge and wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video. Jazakallahu khairan to each of you. In the